The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the spacious kitchen as Roberto Oliveira, a 62-year-old man with gray hair and hands calloused from decades of honest work, watched his daughter Mariana move nervously around the room. She avoided his gaze, fidgeting with the utensils on the imported marble countertop he had paid for less than a year ago. "So, what do you think about me making my famous turkey for Christmas this year? Your mother, may she rest in peace, always said it was the best she'd ever tasted," Roberto commented, a gentle smile lighting up his time-worn face as he remembered Helena, his late wife. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Mariana finally turned to face him, her eyes revealing a discomfort that Roberto had never seen directed at him before. "Dad, about Christmas," she began, her voice trembling. Well, Felipe's parents will be here, and She paused, taking a deep breath. "They prefer that you don't come." The words hit Roberto like a slap to the face. He stood frozen, his hands gripping the coffee cup as the world around him seemed to slow down. "What do you mean I won't be there?" "It's Christmas, Mariana. Family," he said, his voice low and controlled, but with a note of disbelief he couldn't hide. "I know, Dad, but the Mendonças are different. They have certain expectations about how the holidays should be, and..." She gestured vaguely, as if that explained everything. Roberto looked around the connected living room and kitchen, the elegant furniture he had helped buy, the silk curtains, the hardwood floor he had financed. His eyes landed on Mariana's graduation photo above the fireplace, the college he had fully paid for, working extra shifts for 5 years. "I understand," he finally said, carefully setting the cup down on the countertop. "I'm ruining the image you want to present to your in-laws." "That's not it, Dad. It's just that..." "It's exactly that, Mariana," he interrupted, standing up. His voice showed no anger, only a deep sadness and a sudden understanding that hurt more than any rage. "I'm too old and simple for the new life you've built for yourself." He grabbed his hat from the hook by the door, the same worn leather hat that Mariana always asked him not to wear when visiting her, claiming it didn't match the decor. "Dad, please don't be like this." "Like what, Mariana? Hurt? Disappointed? What did you expect me to feel?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm leaving. Have a Merry Christmas with your family." The word family came out as a painful whisper as he walked through the door, leaving a stunned Mariana standing in the middle of that perfect house he had helped create. Roberto sat in his 10-year-old Ford truck, impeccably maintained, and stayed there, hands shaking on the steering wheel as the weight of rejection settled on his shoulders. He looked at the house, elegant, imposing, with its perfectly manicured garden, and tried to swallow the lump in his throat. He remembered the day he signed the check for the down payment on that house, the expression of happiness on Mariana's face. "It's perfect, Dad," she had exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Now, apparently, he was the only imperfect piece in the equation. With heavy fingers, Roberto opened the glove compartment and pulled out a worn folder. Inside, meticulously organized as Helena always insisted they be, were the bank statements and receipts from the past few years. He began to flip through the pages, calculating in his mind. 2,800 reais a month for Mariana's new BMW, which he had been paying religiously for 2 years. The down payment on the house, 150,000. The imported furniture, nearly 60,000. Mariana and Felipe's wedding 3 years ago, 200,000, including the honeymoon in Greece. The numbers danced before his eyes as reality hit him. He had emptied his savings, delayed his own retirement, all to give his daughter the life that Helena always dreamed she would have. And now, he was unwelcome at the Christmas table. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Camila, Felipe's wife, flashed on the screen. Roberto hesitated before answering, taking a deep breath to find composure. "Hello, Camila." "Roberto, Mariana told me what happened. She's very upset." Camila's voice sounded polite as ever, but there was something calculated in her tone that Roberto had never noticed before, or perhaps never wanted to notice. "She's upset?" Roberto replied incredulously. "I was informed that I'm not welcome at my own daughter's house for Christmas, and she's upset." "Roberto, please understand. Felipe's parents are traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. I'm sure you understand. What atmosphere would that be, Camila? One without Mariana's old country dad? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Camila sighed. I'll be honest with you, Roberto, because I think you deserve that. Eduardo and Teresa Mendonça are cultured, refined people. They expect conversations about literature, international politics, art. Topics that a simple man like me with no college education wouldn't be able to keep up with. Roberto finished, his voice strangely calm. Is that right, Camila? I didn't mean to offend, but yes. And Felipe is trying to impress his dad, who can help him get that promotion at work. And I would get in the way of that. Understand, Roberto, you're a good man, you've worked hard, but there's a certain refinement that… Just say it, Camila. I'm tired of beating around the bush. There was another sigh from the other end of the line, and then the words came out like an avalanche. Roberto, you're a man without formal education, with simple tastes and provincial habits. Helena was a simple woman who got lucky in life, and you both did the best you could. But now Mariana belongs to another world, and she needs to fit in. That's all. The silence that followed was deafening. Roberto felt each word like a knife, especially the disrespectful mention of Helena, his beloved wife who had passed away 5 years ago. Thank you for your honesty, Camila, he finally replied, his voice steady despite the pain. Have a Merry Christmas. He hung up before she could respond and stared at the phone screen for long minutes. Then, with a sudden determination, he accessed his banking app. The numbers confirmed what he already knew. 2,800 reais a month for the BMW, totaling 67,200 reais just in installments over the last 2 years, not counting the down payment and insurance. Roberto made a few more calls that afternoon. The first was to his bank to cancel the car financing. The second was to his accountant. The third was to his sister Cecilia, the only family he had left besides Mariana. 3 days later, Roberto's phone rang again. Camila's name flashed on the screen, and he answered after the second ring. Roberto, her voice sounded strangely friendly. I need a favor. Felipe's parents arrived today at the airport at 2 p.m. Felipe is in an important meeting he can't cancel, and I'm busy with Christmas preparations. Could you pick them up? Roberto felt a wave of indignation wash over him. First, they excluded him from Christmas, and now they wanted him to drive the very people who didn't want him around? But then, something clicked in his mind. A plan began to form. Of course, Camila, he replied with a studied cordiality. I'd be happy to pick up the Mendonças at the airport. Great! Their flight is JJ-142, arriving at 2 p.m. They don't know the city, so don't worry. Roberto gently interrupted. I'll take care of everything. At 2 p.m. that day, Eduardo and Teresa Mendonça waited in the airport arrival area. By 3 p.m., they were still waiting. By 4 p.m., Eduardo had made 3 furious calls to Roberto's cell, all going straight to voicemail. By 6 p.m., a taxi pulled up in front of Roberto's house. Eduardo Mendonça, a tall man of 65 with perfectly styled hair and a crisp suit, got out first, followed by Teresa, a slender woman with a severe expression and ostentatious jewelry. Roberto was waiting for them on the porch, sitting in his rocking chair, calmly sipping a glass of lemonade. You! Eduardo stormed down the garden path, his face red with rage. How dare you leave us waiting for 4 hours at the airport? Roberto stood up calmly, setting the glass down on the side table. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Mendonça. Welcome to my humble abode. Don't come at me with sarcasm. Do you know who I am? I could have died waiting at that airport. Roberto tilted his head slightly, a serene smile on his lips. Die waiting? In an air-conditioned airport? With access to restaurants, taxis, and phones? He shook his head. What a dramatic exaggeration, Mr. Mendonça. Teresa stepped forward, her eyes flashing. You did this on purpose. Camila told us you were upset about not being included in Christmas with us. Upset? Roberto repeated, still calm. No, Mrs. Mendonça. I was hurt to be excluded from the celebration in the house I helped pay for by the daughter I've supported my whole life because of people who find my presence inappropriate. Eduardo huffed, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt in a nervous gesture. Look, you simple man. We don't have time for your provincial games. We're tired and now you know the taste of disdain. Roberto finished, his tone still surprisingly gentle. I imagine it's not pleasant. Let's go, Eduardo. Teresa tugged at her husband's arm. This man is impossible. You're welcome to call another taxi, Roberto offered, gesturing toward the street. Or you can use the house phone to call Camila and Felipe. After all, you are the honored guests for Christmas, aren't you? The couple shot Roberto daggers before hastily retreating down the garden path, Eduardo already on his phone. When they disappeared from view, Roberto sat back down in his rocking chair. For the first time in days, he felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't seeking revenge. It was something deeper, more essential, dignity. 3 days later, Roberto was having breakfast when the doorbell rang. It was his neighbor, Augusto, holding the local newspaper with a worried expression. Roberto, have you seen this? On the 3rd page of the newspaper, an article titled, The Abandonment of the Elderly, a Social Shame, took up almost half a page. The byline was from someone named Carlos Martins, but the content left no doubt about who was behind it. The article narrated the story of a couple of respectable elderly people who had been cruelly abandoned at the airport during a severe storm by a man described as bitter and vengeful. Although no names were mentioned directly, there were enough details for anyone who knew Roberto to identify him. Severe storm, Roberto murmured, incredulous. It was 30 degrees and clear skies that day. Augusto shook his head sadly. The worst part is that everyone knows Eduardo Mendonça is a close friend of the owner of this newspaper. It's pure defamation. Roberto carefully folded the newspaper, his mind racing. Thank you for showing me this, Augusto. After the neighbor left, Roberto sat down at his computer, a gift Helena had insisted he get to stay connected with the modern world. She had always been wiser than him in many ways. With methodical patience, he began to browse Mariana's, Felipe's, and Camila's social media. The images told a clear story. Luxurious vacations, dinners at expensive restaurants, designer clothes, all proudly posted, often with captions like, gift from daddy, or spoiled by dear father-in-law. Roberto saved each image, every comment. Then he organized his bank statements, receipts, and contracts from the last 5 years, all meticulously filed thanks to the habits Helena had taught him. Mariana's BMW, the down payment on the house, the furniture, the wedding, the trips, college tuition. Every penny documented, every sacrifice recorded. When he finished, it was already night. Roberto looked at the photo of Helena on the bedside table. She was smiling, with that mix of strength and gentleness that had always captivated him. What would you do, my love? He asked the silent photo. The answer came not in words, but in a certainty that grew within him. Helena had never tolerated injustice or disrespect, especially when directed at those she loved. She would have fought, not with anger or revenge, but with truth and dignity. Roberto made a few prints, organized several folders, and then went to bed. For the first time since the conversation with Mariana, he slept soundly, without nightmares. Christmas Eve arrived, bringing with it a gentle chill and a starry sky. At 8 p.m., Roberto parked his truck a block away from Mariana and Felipe's house. He wore his only suit, the one he had worn at Helena's funeral and, before that, at Mariana's wedding. With a leather folder under his arm, a graduation gift from Mariana to him, ironically, he walked to the house. Colorful lights decorated the windows, and through them, he could see the elegantly set table for 12. Christmas music floated softly through the cracks. Roberto rang the doorbell and waited. It was Felipe who answered, his face transforming from a polished smile to one of shock as he recognized him. Roberto, what are you doing here? I came for Christmas, he replied simply, stepping inside before Felipe could stop him. The room gradually fell silent as Roberto entered. Mariana froze with a tray of canapés in her hands. Camila dropped the wine glass she was holding, and the Mendonças, sitting in the center of the sofa like kings on a throne, visibly stiffened. Dad? Mariana finally managed to say. What are you doing here? I came to bring my Christmas gift for all of you, Roberto replied calmly, placing the folder on the coffee table. Especially for Mr. and Mrs. Mendonça, who seem so interested in my life and character. Eduardo stood up, his face already red. This is an invasion. I'm calling the police. Please do that, Roberto replied calmly. It would be interesting to explain to the authorities about defamation and slander published in local newspapers. As he spoke, Roberto opened the folder and began distributing small sets of documents to each of the 12 guests, who observed the scene with a mix of embarrassment and fascination. "What is this?" asked an elegant lady whom Roberto didn't know. "This, ma'am, is a record of my generosity and the return I received for it." Each folder contained copies of bank statements, receipts, and contracts showing Roberto's financial contributions to Mariana and Felipe over the years. Photos from social media where the couple flaunted luxuries he had paid for. And finally, a copy of the defamatory article with detailed annotations exposing every lie. As you can see, there was no storm that day. The Mendonças aren't vulnerable elderly people. They're 65 years old and in excellent health. And they weren't abandoned. They were deliberately left waiting for a few hours after excluding from the Christmas celebration the man who paid for this house, for that BMW parked outside, and for much of the luxury you're enjoying tonight. The silence in the room was absolute. Mariana had sat down, her face pale as she flipped through the documents. Felipe looked as if he wanted to disappear. Camila stared fixedly at the floor. And the Mendonças? The Mendonças seemed to shrink with every passing second. "I didn't come here to ruin your party," Roberto continued, his voice calm and controlled. "I just wanted the truth to be known. I spent my entire life working to give my daughter everything I never had. I sacrificed my dreams, my peaceful retirement, all to see her happy. And when I was deemed unfit to sit at the table I helped pay for, I decided it was time to show everyone who I really am." He adjusted his jacket and looked directly at the Mendonças. "I'm not a refined man, with formal education or conversations about European art. I'm just a father who loved too much, gave too much, and trusted too much." Roberto turned to leave but stopped at the door, looking back at Mariana one last time. "The BMW financing has been canceled. You have 30 days to settle the situation, or the car will be repossessed. Merry Christmas." And with that, he stepped out into the starry night, leaving behind a deafening silence. March arrived with its gentle rains and promises of renewal. Roberto was in his garden, planting the tomato seeds that Helena always cultivated, when an unfamiliar car parked in front of his house. It was a compact model, quite different from the luxurious BMW Mariana used to drive. His daughter got out of the vehicle, looking smaller and more fragile than he remembered. Her eyes were marked with deep, dark circles, and her hair, once always impeccably styled, was tied up in a simple ponytail. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, approaching the garden. Roberto stood up, wiping the dirt from his hands on his worn jeans. "Mariana," he replied with a nod. "What a surprise. Can I come in?" He hesitated for just a moment before nodding and leading her into the house. In the simple yet welcoming kitchen, Roberto prepared coffee for both of them. The silence between them was thick, laden with months of unspoken words. "I received a notice yesterday," Mariana finally spoke, looking at the cup in her hands. "The BMW will be repossessed next week." Roberto nodded, not surprised. He knew this would eventually happen. "Felipe and I are separating," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "After that Christmas night, nothing has been the same. The guests left quickly. The Mendonças went home the next day. And Camilla..." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Camilla blamed me for everything. She said I didn't know how to manage you correctly." Roberto felt a pang of pain at this, not for himself, but for the daughter he still loved despite everything. "I'm living with a friend now," Mariana continued. "The house. We had to sell it. We couldn't keep up the payments without your help." She finally raised her eyes, meeting his. "I came to ask for forgiveness, Dad. And also to ask for your help. Financial help, I mean. Just until I get back on my feet." Roberto studied his daughter's face for a long moment. There was regret there, yes, but also that familiar expectation, the certainty that, as always, he would give in, pay, sacrifice himself. "I forgive you, Mariana," he finally said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I will always forgive you. You are my daughter, and nothing will change that." The relief on her face was immediate, followed by a hopeful smile. "So, you'll help me? I just need about $6,000 a month temporarily to rent a decent apartment and—" "No." The word hung between them, simple and definitive. "No?" Mariana repeated, incredulous. "I won't finance your lifestyle again, Mariana. I can forgive you. I can love you. I can even welcome you for Christmas, the real Christmas, with homemade turkey and simple gifts. But I will no longer be your bank." "But Dad, I'm desperate. I have nowhere to go." Roberto smiled gently. "You're 28 years old, educated, smart, and healthy. You can get a job, rent a simple place, start over, and I'll be here to support you emotionally every step of the way." Tears began to roll down Mariana's face. "You're punishing me." "No, daughter. I'm freeing you, and myself too." They talked for another hour. There were tears, reproaches, and finally, a silent understanding. When Mariana left, Roberto felt a mix of sadness and hope. Maybe someday they could build a relationship based on mutual respect, not financial transactions. The following week, Roberto traveled to visit his sister Cecilia, who lived in a coastal town 200 kilometers away. He had never been particularly close to her. His dedication to Mariana and Helena had consumed all his energy over the years. But now, sitting on Cecilia's porch, watching his nieces and nephews play in the garden, Roberto felt a new definition of family forming in his heart. They were people who truly wanted his presence, who valued his simple stories and modest sense of humor. "You look different, brother," Cecilia remarked, pouring him more lemonade. "Lighter." Roberto smiled, watching the sunset over the sea. "I spent my whole life being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate my sacrifice," he answered honestly. "I wasted years in savings trying to buy the respect and love that should be given freely. And now? Now?" He took a deep breath, feeling the salty sea air fill his lungs. "Now I'm living for myself, for Helena, who always wanted me to be happy, and for the people who truly value my company, not my wallet." Cecilia squeezed his hand affectionately. "Welcome back, brother." That night, in a simple room at his sister's house, Roberto dreamed of Helena. She was smiling at him with approval, her eyes shining with that unconditional love that had always been his greatest treasure. "You finally understood, my love," she said in the dream. "True family is the one that embraces you as you are, not as they wish you to be." Roberto woke up with tears in his eyes, but they were tears of peace. He had lost a lot: money, illusions, and perhaps even his daughter for a time. But he had found something infinitely more valuable: his dignity. And with it, finally, his freedom. If this story about the value of dignity and the true meaning of family touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story we share here is created with love to move and inspire. Until next time.